right, hey comrades, what's up? Next, we're gonna hit up the Bond stories for Cafe Sweety. Then we're gonna do the 8th event, which is Bow Wow Paradise, and then talk about Biscuit, the main character of that, because she's not in the story at all. Neither is her squad. And her squad, each member of the squad gets their own event. So when in these cases where each squad member gets an event, we're just going to deal with the squad members as they come up, and that way we can shove some of the characters that like we can clear out some more of these characters that like came with the original game that don't have like their own individual events where they get introduced, or at least some of the characters get introduced, or they don't have like major roles in this story, because Cafe Sweety has like one of them, Milk is not in the main story whatsoever. For example, with these guys. So, but we're gonna start with Freema. Freema is the leader of Cafe Sweety, and multiple times the game is like, oh, it's Cafe Sweety, Tetra's most powerful squad, and the whole time you just like take your eyes and you glance over at Rogue, Blanc, and Noir, who we haven't talked about yet, who are Squad 777, who are hands down, without any question, the best squad in Tetra as of April 2025, right? Cafe or Blanc and Noir were like the most powerful duet for like a long time in the game, and then Rogue is stellar, particularly when you use her with Cinderella. While there's absolute like Milk is trash, Sugar's not good, and Freema is like I am building Freema up, and people have built her up to be used in a true damage group, but the true damage team is not meta by any stretch of the imagination, but she's easily the best character out of the three when we're talking about just like pure powerhouse or whatever. But anyway, by canon, Cafe Sweety is the best, so whatever. And it's even more sad because both Freema and Milk have favorite items, and favorite items can like really break characters and make them supremely better, which occurred with like Drake, Laplace, Helm. Holo went from like mediocre to bad characters to being good, not great, right? Actually, Helm was pretty great. She's, but good, right? So anyway, let's get started. So Freema has a very simple routine. Milk wakes her up in the morning. They go on a mission. She drinks cream coffee because Freema is like Korean for cream or something. I don't know. And then she goes to sleep. Her whole thing is like sleep. Then one day she can't fall back asleep, and then days go by and she can't go to sleep. And so before long, we're called in. She complains to us, and she's like laying on her couch on her like futon and refusing to leave. And we're like, you got to get out of here. Part of the reason is probably because you're in this room. And she's like, no, I have no energy. I can't get up. I can't do anything. We get her some cream coffee to try to lure her out. Doesn't work. All right, time to call an ambulance. The ambulance squad is Seraphim. It's Mary and Pepper. So they show up. They do a diagnostic check. Body's fine, but her mind, well, it is a human mind, which does require sleep. And if you remember, what happens if Nikke start to kind of go crazy or start to like lose their mind, then they have a mind switch and they go like nuts, and then they have to be put down. And this mind switch is gonna happen. So we talk about just tranquilizing her. She's like, no. She suggests that we do anesthesia, and then we can like take her back to the clinic and repair her. She doesn't like that idea either. And so Mary, getting frustrated, is like, okay, you have 24 hours to find a solution, and then the mind switch is gonna happen. So you better figure it out. So at this point, Milk and Sugar and us, the commander, we all try to do different things to get her to sleep. Milk plays her a lullaby of death metal, which doesn't work. Sugar wants to stuff her with food till she goes into a coma, and then Freema just wants cream coffee. And so she keeps getting Sugar or Milk to bring her cream coffee. And eventually we're like, hey, maybe we should just go to the cafe. And she's like, no. And we're like, well, we can't carry her. Maybe one of you should carry her. No, we're not going to do that either. And so we just said, I got an idea. So we call Mighty Tools, who is leader in Senti, to come and fix her couch up so that it can be rolled out to the cafe so that she can get out of her room and whatnot. So Senti comes and starts putting wheels on the couch. But as soon as she gets out there, she's like, oh, hey, one of these legs is slightly off. And it's off by like, it's like the princess and the fucking pea here with Freema. It's like off by like a fraction of like a quarter of a centimeter or some bullshit, like a millimeter or something. And the second she fixes it, Freema's like, oh my gosh. And she lays down and then passes the fuck out. Milk and Sugar are like, what the fuck? And we have to like calm them down and drag them out of there. A few days later, we head over to the cafe. Freema is in hibernation, according to her squad mates, because she's making up for lost sleep. And then the mission they were going to miss because Freema wasn't getting sleep. Milk was like, oh, it was a success, so everything's good. So we head in to see Freema, and she lets us in, even though she's supposedly like sleeping. And then we have like a non-conversation, a lot of grunts and like, yep, okay. And then she asks if we have any complaints for her. Oh, and then we say, yeah, actually we do. Instead of like sending people to get coffee one at a time, next time just have them get all the coffee that you want at one time. And then she gets perturbed as Milk and Sugar said the same thing to her. She's like, whatever. So we head out and she says thanks, which causes us to turn because she never says thanks about anything, and she's already asleep, which is the end of her Bond story. Pretty short and sweet. So her favorite item. So this takes place like after the Bond story, obviously. So Freema is getting ready for sleep one night, the usual procedure, but again, she can't sleep. She checks the bed, bed's fine, she starts her routine over, and then she finds out that ruh-roh, her pillow has burst open. So she calls us, of course, because that's what we do. Because we're a simp for every Nikke in the fucking arc. And she even says this. She doesn't call us a simp, but she's like, because you always come and help Nikkes when they ask for help, that's a fact. She asks if we have cotton, but of course we don't, because why would we have cotton? And then we're like, do you have cotton? And she's like, no, I don't like to have cotton because I don't want to prepare for things in advance because it's bad luck. Okay, Freema. And she's like, okay, well, let's go get you a new pillow. I don't want a new pillow. And it's like, all right, so we head out to find cotton. We head out to the market. They don't have cotton. We go to Maid Cafe. Coco mentions that Soda's chest feels like cotton, so Freema does a test by squeezing her boobies. It's not soft enough. They bring out a bunch of stuff like cake and stuff for her to test to see if it's soft enough. None of it is. At that point, it is like maybe she tried the police station because apparently Poli's hair is super soft. So soft that after touching it, when we get over there, that Freema's like, yes, can you shave your head so I can use this for my pillow? And Poli's like, nah, bitch, absolutely not. At that juncture, Ada contacts us to meet us at our room. And then we need to hurry because she's got something for us. And so Freema apologizes to Poli, and then we all head off. When we get there, we see that Jan is there. Jan is a member, like Ruby of, God, what's their fucking name? Like Televarinon or whatever. But her specialty is daily use items, apparently. So we go back and forth about buying a pillow, getting materials for a pillow. And then Freema mentions that she got the money for the original pillow from Mustang himself. And then Jan's like, okay, well, I can sell you cotton for a pillow for 1 million credits. And Freema's like, how about no credits? And then Jan's like, all right, I'll make you a deal. If you can go get a package that was lost on the surface, I will give you the materials for free. And it's like, all right, cool. So we take the elevator to the surface. There's no package. Apparently, it's been dragged off. So we follow it. And on the way, we ask her about not wanting to prepare. And then she tells us about before she became a Nikke, she used to prepare all the time. She was a member of a mercenary group, and they'd always get ready and always do the stuff. And despite all her preparations, all the hard work, everything, her whole crew died. And then she got messed up or killed. And so at that point, she became a Nikke. And when she became a Nikke, she was like, fuck it. I'd rather just sleep than worry about all this stuff. And like, it's not going to help anyway. That way, if stuff happens, she feels more confident about being able to make adjustments in the moment because she's not relying on these like preparations that she made. At this point, we see the package. Rapture's like standing over it, and so it's time to start fighting. And she kills all the Raptures and gets the package. Upon the completion of the mission, we get the cotton from Jan, and then we're back in her room. She realizes at this juncture, after she stuffs the cotton back in, that she cannot sew. So we sew it up for her, and this time we include a picture of her face and her name on the pillow, which she loves. This time, it's a one-of-a-kind pillow, so it'll never get lost. And she acts mad, but she secretly thinks it's the best thing ever. And she says good night and then goes to sleep. And we wish her some sweet dreams, and then we leave, which ends the favorite item plot for Freema. Next up, we have Milk. Cafe Sweety gets a job to retrieve something for the central government. Sugar's like, nah. Freema's like, I'm going to sleep. So Milk asks us to help. And what happened is we need to pull a heist, apparently. Because we got to get the package from the central government, not for the central government. Sorry, I misspoke. So we go ahead and break on in. Milk beats up all the guards, and then she breaks the safe to get the item. Unfortunately, the safe had a self-destruct thing on it. So we have to jump out the window to avoid getting exploded, but in the process, we lose the object. Back at the cafe, Freema and Sugar are giving Milk a hard time. We're able to track down Dala to see if she can help us with this, and she knows exactly what happened to the item. After we pay her for the information, she reveals that it was passed hands multiple times, and now it's a prize in the underground arena, not the arena we play in the game. The underground arena is an illegal fight club for Nikkes. Milk is like, sweet, I'm going to go fight and I'm going to win. And then she loses in the first round. Fortunately, she gets another shot. It's like you got to lose twice or whatever. At this point, she just wants to steal it from the winner. We call her out on that and tell her to stop being such a weakling and such a bitch and whatever. And she's like, whatever. And then we fight her hand-to-hand combat and we win. And then we call her out again. And this time she's like, and then we take her back to her room so that, we can practice fighting, and then we can show her a video of her next opponent so we can strategize. We stay up all night planning, and she wins that battle. Later on at Cafe Sweety, Milk talks about how she... so she wins. Then she continues to win, but eventually she gets to the final bout. And at that point, we skip ahead back to Cafe Sweety. She's talking about how she lost the final battle because it was the same Nikke, which is a mass-produced Nikke, that she lost to in the first round. But that's okay. She still got the package because the Nikke was so impressed by how much Milk had improved that she's like, here's the item. I don't really want this shit anyway. I just love to fight. Frima then teases her by saying, I never thought you'd change, Milk. And then Milk challenges Frima and Sugar to a fight. And then Milk beats them both and demands that they bring her milk coffee. At that juncture, they get another commission to go get something from the Outer Rim. Frima wants to take the easy route, but just like when we gave Milk a hard time about taking the easy route earlier, Milk confronts her and gets her to be like, no, we're going to do things the right way, and we're going to work hard and do our best. And then as we're leaving with Milk, she again wants a rematch with us because she's like, I've gotten so much better at fighting, I can beat you this time. And then we win again. She's flabbergasted. And we tell her the reason why we're able to win is because we know all her moves, because we pay so much attention to her when she's fighting, so we can predict and kind of figure it out. And then she gets sad because she talks about how little she knows about us, even though we know so much about her. And then she gets a little embarrassed because clearly she likes us. And we tell her there's one thing that we don't know about her. And then we give her a smoochie because we want to know what she tastes like. So now we do, which ends her Bond story. A bit later, for her favorite item story, we run into Cafe Sweety as they are wrapping up a commission. Milk is super excited to see us, and we chat a bunch about stuff. Off on the side, Frima and Sugar are gossiping about our relationship. Sugar is convinced that we never kissed, even though Frima thinks it's happened. Both Sugar and Frima agree that they should get involved and help us get closer together. And so we all head to the maid cafe to check on their coffees, because that's part of their job as Sweet Cafe, is to make sure everyone's coffee is up to par. They're really enjoying themselves. Frima's sleeping, obviously, and then Sugar confronts Milk about our relationship. We're not there for this. Milk freaks out, awakening Frima, and then she admits to having kissed us just one time, though. They argue about kissing and about relationships, and then finally Milk gets fed up and frustrated and storms off. Ada and Soda come up and comment on the situation to Sugar and Frima. Later on, Milk's back in her room thinking about how to get the courage to pursue the commander. She has this present box that she got, but she doesn't know what she wants to do with it because she wants to give it to us, but she's nervous and embarrassed, and she opens it up and takes something out and thinks about it. Later on, Milk comes to our room as we're finishing up some monthly reports. We enjoy just hanging out in silence. Milk then expresses her concerns about the relationship not progressing as she would like, and that she's not learned anything new about us since she made the promise from her Bond story that she would learn everything about us. She then states she's going to remedy this on our date. So we go to an arcade after touring downtown for milk coffee at cafes, which again is part of their occupational job. There we compete to see who can get the highest score in this punching game. Milk wins, obviously, because she punches the thing so hard because she's a Nikke. She then admits that we are even though she's physically stronger, that we are much more stronger inside, and that by nature she's a coward. We talk about that and how our strength comes from the fact that we want to protect all those around us. So we can never give up. We always have to keep fighting and making sure that everyone's going to be okay and that someday all the people will be able to go back to the surface. At this point, she wants to go to the surface. She wants to find some raptures. We talk some more about resolve, about courage, about protecting those we care about, and she swears that someday she'll be one of the best Nikkes in all the arc. And she wants to do that so she can protect us. She then charges in the battle. After some more time and several missions, we have a Netflix and chill moment back in our room. And we talk about our relationship some more. She makes coffee, and as she returns, we talk about how much we enjoy just being with her and that the coffee represents our love and such. She gets super embarrassed, being like, I'm not usually this girly, but I can't help it around you, and yada, yada. And we talk about relationship stuff. And she admits to being like a true tomboy in some sense, and so acting girly and doing girly stuff just kind of like throws her off. And we say, hey, we like it when you're a tomboy. At that point, she gives us a present. We love it. And Muck doesn't know how to express herself with words, so we fuck. And your favorite item story. The last cafe sweetie is Sugar. We've run into Sugar a few different times in event stories and whatnot. She's kind of a wild one, if I have to say so myself. Anyway, her Bond story starts. We're at a jazz bar just waiting for somebody. That somebody is obviously Sugar. She comes in, orders coffee, Sugar coffee. Also for us, but it's way too sweet. She has a mission in the Outer Rim, and Milk and Freema are busy, so we decide we're going to help her out. But we have to cover her tab first, obviously, because she's a dirtbag. Out in the Outer Rim, we find a mass-produced Nikke. She's the one who hired Sugar. She has, like, one request. She got bought, she got sold, dumped out here, and all her combat stuff was removed, so she can't really defend herself or do anything. And she doesn't trust humans, necessarily, but Sugar vouches for us. So what does this Nikke want? What she wants is sugar. Not sugar. It's coffee. Real coffee. Because Sugar's like, oh, I got coffee. And she's like, no, I don't want that Splendimin shit. I want actual coffee. They argue about it for a little bit. Argue about how too sugary it is and whatnot. And then she mentions that there's a civil war brewing in the Outer Rim and that she's 100% going to get killed. And that she just wants to have like coffee one more time before she dies because she had coffee with her lover. The last thing she remembers, or her most genuine memory from when she was human, was that drinking coffee and kissing her lover. And then Sugar looks at us and mentions that she's never kissed anyone. And she kind of leans in and we're like, no. Sugar then says, like, we'll get the coffee. And then we talk about maybe stopping the Civil War instead as a bigger thing. But Sugar's like, nah, whatever. So then we go talk to Talentum. This is Jan, Ruby, and Dollar, obviously. And they're like, real coffee is way too expensive for you. And we're like, all right, we'll just keep looking. At that point, Dollar mentions that there is a cheap way to get some real coffee because sometimes things are stolen and then they're sold in the Outer Rim for much less. So we thank her. And then we mention... Oh, and then they remind Sugar that she owes them money, which apparently is like a trend with her, for all the little favors she does. And she's like, just add it to my tab. So we go and find the place that Dollar was telling us about. Sugar tries to break in, but the door's just open, and there's tons of coffee everywhere. We take someone, we're heading out, and then we get accosted by two mass-produced Nikkes. And they're like, oh, yeah, there's a civil war coming, something, something. And then Sugar threatens them, and they're like, oh, I don't know if we want to fight you. We're just going to lose anyway. But they're upset because, man, we're getting in trouble because you stole this stuff, and there's nothing we can do to stop you. And then Sugar's like, I got an idea. What you tell them is you got surprised because someone stole some coffee, and then you got beat up. And they're like, what? And then she beats the shit out of them. So it's literally, she's like, just tell them the truth. At that point, Sugar tries to be seductive with us again, which again, we shut down immediately. More guards show up. She beats the shit out of them. And then she's like, don't ever forget me, the queen of Sweet Cafe, Milk, so that they'll track her down and get revenge on her instead. At that point, we take the coffee back, but we realize it's not real coffee. She is sad, but assumes that's for the best and that we should accept. And then we're like, yeah, maybe we should accept that. Like, we take it back to the girl, the other Nikke, and she drinks it. And she's like, no, this is good, but it's not real coffee. But you know what? Maybe you just can't get real coffee. It's okay. I consider your mission complete. And then Sugar's like, hell no, we'll figure this out. So they talk about what they truly want. Sugar wants to get a coffee kiss like this girl, and we ignore her with that too. She's determined to go to the surface because there's these areas, these junk heaps, where stuff is like stockpiled before the arc, and a lot of that stuff's still there. So we head out to a junk pile and we search all day. We find a bunch of random stuff, like an engine that she can use for her bike, some books. At some point, Sugar's like, we should make out in this trash. And we're like, no, absolutely not. Which I feel. I had some chick once try to make out with me in a graveyard, and I was like, I'm not into this at all. Eventually, we find a container that says coffee. We take the beans back to the counters. Rappy's like, oh, yeah, I know how to make coffee, but doing it is another story. So she calls Emma because she's actually made real coffee before. So Emma bumbles around trying to make stuff. She actually makes a decent cup, unlike her cooking, which is always terrible. But she loses a lot of the stock and ends up with only 2 cups worth. So Sugar gets the first cup, and she fills it with sugar, and she's like, till it's like soup. And she's like, I love this. This is the best. And everyone else is like, nah, we're good. Emma then puts the other cup into an airtight container. At that juncture, Dala calls and says, "Hey, civil war is on. If you hurry up, you can get there. But the ARC, like the central government's going to shut the whole shit down pretty soon. So you got to go quick." So we go in. We end up finding like a lot of dead people, a lot of dead guys and whatnot. We find a guy who says the Nikkes are probably in the central square, and then he's like, "Can you please kill me?" And we're like, "No," but Sugar gives him a shotgun and says, "Hey, this is your story. You figure out how to end." And as we ride off, you hear a shot. It's pretty dark. At that point, Sugar's like, we're like, "What are we going to do if we get attacked by humans? You can't hurt human beings." And she's like, "Don't worry, I got rubber bullets. It's going to be great." So then Sugar goes and beats the shit out of a lot of people. And eventually we find a bunch of the damaged Nikkes, and one of them is our client, and she's dying. So Sugar pours the coffee down her throat, and then immediately, as she does, she dies. So now it's time to leave. Later on, we're watching a broadcast of the war, of this little civil war out in the outer rim, and we're sharing the last sips of coffee from the coffee, like the last kind of drizzles of what was left over, and it's like, wow, this is excellent. And Sugar's like, this is way too bitter. It needs more something sweet. And so we're like, all right, but you got us. And so then we kiss her, and her lips taste like brown sugar, which wraps up her Bond story. So the 8th event is one called Bow Wow Paradise, and it focuses on Biscuit, who is the character you can get at this time. This is like back in, I want to say March 2024, 2023 or something. Yeah, I think 2023. Anyway, so we're at the shelter, which is the place where all the animals or the dogs are at for the ARC, the actual dogs. And the dogs in the shelter are planning something. At some point, Biscuit shows up to feed them, and Max, who's like the leader of the pack, pretends to be a little bit sick. So Biscuit goes to get him some medicine. And then when she kind of like heads, all the dogs rush her and escape through the door. Biscuit tries to catch up with them, but they rush off way too fast. At some point, she runs into Nero, who's one of her squad mates, and their squad is Happy Zoo, she's like the cat, Nikke, while Biscuit is like the dog, right? And Nero's resting in the sun. Biscuit tells her about Maxa and the escape, and Nero's like, "I can't help you. Maybe Leona can," who's the other member. But Biscuit's like, I don't know. She kind of freaks me out with the lion thing. So how about the commander? And they're like, "Oh yeah, the commander." So she comes to our room. She tells us about the whole situation. And again, we get like re-emphasis that real animals are heavily controlled by the central government, and that's what the shelter's for. We learned this originally through my storytelling experience here with Coco's Bond story, which went up a few weeks back. And that even though the wealthy elite and politically connected can have pets, that when they do, the central government tracks it extremely closely. And so the animals are not in danger, because if anything happens to the animals, those people are going to be fucked. But they can still cause problems and cause issues. So we agree that we're going to help. And then we are like, hey, we find, and Biscuit can talk to dogs. So we ask her, like, hey, maybe when we find them, we should ask them why they ran away, so we make sure this doesn't happen again. And at that point, Biscuit gets a call from ACP, or the police. Over at the police station, Polly and Miranda are dealing with a bunch of dogs that have been captured by people and brought up to the police, like all the puppies and everything. And they're about to put them in cells when Biscuit and the commander show up. Biscuit finds out from the dogs that Max has led the rebellion. Again, Max is the leader I mentioned before. And that she's concerned because she's never had problems with Max before. And so this whole situation is very odd. At that juncture, Max strolls in. He orders all the dogs to leave, and they make a break for it. And we all try to stop him, which includes Miranda and Polly and Biscuit and and us, the commander. But to no avail. They escape. And Polly and Miranda are bashing into each other, trying to catch all the dogs. We discussed how Max must have really good reason, because there's no such thing as like a bad dog. And this is the second time Polly gets referred to as being kind of like a dog. Because in Freema's Bond story I mentioned earlier, I didn't say this before, but part of the reason her hair is so soft is because it's almost like fur. Anyway, so there must be something there I'll get to eventually. Anyway, at this point the dogs are all in the shopping mall, and we head over there. And before we leave, Biscuit gives Polly a dog treat, essentially, for helping him out. And she's like, "Oh, this is excellent. Thank you so much." Like, what? Anyway, with the help of the citizens at the mall, we're able to capture all the dogs and put them back in their cages. At this point, Biscuit approaches Max to be like, "Hey, what's going on? Why don't you talk to me? Something." And then Max is like, "I am not going back to the shelter." And then he runs off. And Biscuit's like very distraught about this whole situation. So he asks the other dogs what's going on. And they're like very quiet. So she bribes them with food. And apparently, Max just wanted to see the ARC. Biscuit feels bad because she talks about the ARC all the time with Max, and he's always very interested, but she never put the two and two together, that maybe she should take him out, or maybe he just wants more space. And we have to fix this issue, but first we have to find and track down Max. So we search around and finally track down Max to a park. Biscuit asks us to go take his special ball and play fetch with him, which will distract him, and then she can grab him, and then we can have like a real conversation. Heading into the park, we find Leader and Volt. Leader is the leader of Leader is the leader of Mighty Tools, and Volt's her dog. He's like a mechanical dog though. So Volt and Max are playing. And then we talk to Leader about the whole situation, and we start playing fetch with the dogs. And then Biscuit jumps out and grabs Max and puts a leash on him. They talk for a bit. Max is not going back to the shelter. His big issue is it's too restrictive. But then Biscuit gets an idea. We can make the shelter bigger, more like the Ark. And then we're like, yeah, we can help too. And then Leader overhearing is like, me and Senti will come help you too. So Leader and Senti get shown the shelter. They talk about how they're going to change things up. Senti has to come. She got dragged out from vacation, so she's kind of nonplussed about the whole situation. But they talk about how the shelter is very large, but that it's purely focused on survival, and that there's not really enough open space, and that it's like closed off rooms and all this stuff. And so then Leader orders Senti to make the shelter more like the Ark. Lots of outdoor space, more moving around. And then Leader pulls out some blueprints and they get started. 2 days later, the shelter is about halfway complete. Leader has a meeting she has to go to, and Senti at that point is going to go finish up her vacation. But they'll be back in a couple days. Just make sure no one touches the shelter, goes inside, or does anything. And they'll finish when they get back. After they leave, though, the dogs all show up. And they rush the shelter. And to our inability to stop them, they all crash into the shelter, and then the whole shelter comes crashing down and collapses. Biscuit scolds them pretty good. We get in touch with Leader. She's pissed, but she says, hey, I'll be back in a couple days. We'll fix it then. The next day, Biscuit's pouring out food for the dogs. They're pretty apprehensive. They're still upset about the whole situation and feel bad and whatnot. So then Biscuit's like, hey, you know what's going to be a good idea? Let's get all of us can go and we can work on the shelter. And so we start doing work. And we spent a bunch of time helping Biscuit set up areas for each one of the dogs. And we learned that Biscuit knows like all the dogs by heart, like all their quirks, all their issues, all their likes, all their dislikes. She's very good at like her job and being in touch with the animals. And then we start working on the outside stuff. And by the next day, the shelter is done, kind of. It's like a completely wackadoo job that's just like hodgepodge together. And it still needs Mighty Tools to come like shore up like the foundations and like the walls and make sure the thing's not going to like fall apart again. But the dogs love it, and Biscuit's having a good time with them. And then Leader and Senti, when they finally come over, they're like, oh, it looks pretty decent. We'll just kind of fix a few things here and then it'll be good to go. And then at that juncture, it's like, hey, doggies, what do you want to call this place? And they come to an agreement, so they're going to call it the Bow Wow Paradise. And so now it's time to celebrate with a meal. Later on, after Leader has come back and fixed up the whole thing so it wouldn't collapse, she's pretty impressed with the work that we did get done. And, you know, we talk about all the dogs are so happy, and they end up running around and celebrating. And that kind of wraps up the storyline. In the epilogue, we get Max's perspective of afterwards, right? So he's just walking around, taking complaints, like, you know, walking around his kingdom, getting like, oh, this guy's doing this, or she's being mean, or this and that. And Max is like taking care of all this stuff. And then he's, you know, watching the dogs. And at some point, he's like standing up on like his little pedestal thingy. It's not a pedestal, but like his little hill or whatever. And Biscuit comes up to feed him. He reflects that at this juncture, because of all the effort and work they put into it, he actually likes the shelter more than the Ark, and he's glad to have this place, glad to have Biscuit, and glad that all this stuff happened so that he can have a good life and have a good time. And he loves the fact that they built this thing with their own hands, which wraps up Bow Wow Paradise. So now let's kind of finish up. We got Biscuit's Bond story. So at some point, I'm assuming after Bow Wow Paradise, Biscuit contacts us, and she needs some help with some dog sitting. She mentions that she loves dog sitting, and she does it all the time, and she helps out, and she runs a shelter, obviously. But this dog sitting job is on Royal Road, and she's got some nervousness about that because that's where all the fancy rich people are. So we go with her to this gigantic mansion on the Royal Road, and there we get introduced to Beatrice, who's the dog. At first, she doesn't seem to like us. We're dirty or something, and Biscuit just thinks she's shy. So the first thing we had to do is feed Beatrice. So Biscuit pulls out some biscuits. Oh, no, some food that she brought, which is not to her liking at all. At that point, Beatrice brings out this royal kibble, and Biscuit mentions this is like the most expensive dog food and that she's never actually had any. And so she asks Beatrice if she can try some. And Beatrice is like, you may. And Biscuit loves it so much, we literally have to like drag her off it from trying it. And then Beatrice brings out a bunch of other flavors so Biscuit can try all of them, which completely fills her up. Meanwhile, Beatrice and us, the commander, are just hanging on the couch. And when asked if Beatrice is hungry, she's like, no, I'm good. And the next thing is we're going to play with Beatrice, but she doesn't want any of the toys Biscuit brought. So we decided we're going to go outside and play some ball, and then we'll use some of these high-end treats that the owner of Beatrice makes herself as a reward. And at that juncture, Biscuit's like, well, I want to play too, and I want to win some of these treats because they look so good. And so then Biscuit wins every single time and takes all the treats. And then we leave her to play ball alone with herself as we sit with Beatrice, who is extremely thrown off by Biscuit's behavior. Next up, it's time for a walk. We convince Beatrice that we're going to go for a walk in the Ark. Normally, she just walks around in the front of the mansion and chills there, but she's like, oh, I'll give it a shot. So we go walking around. She loves it. We take her to see Polly. They have a blast because Polly's a dog, I guess. Then she meets Vault. They have fun as well. And then we're heading back to the mansion. At some point, we get accosted by a strange couple who knock out the commander and Biscuit and steal Beatrice. After Biscuit and the commander recover, Biscuit starts howling and listening for Beatrice. Eventually, we figure out where she's at. Meanwhile, the couple is with Beatrice. They're talking about ransoming her. They already destroyed the tracking chip. They're going to make all this money. And then Beatrice starts howling and then attacks the woman. At that juncture, as the man's about to do something, Biscuit shows up and knocks him the fuck out as well. Polly gets called. She comes and arrests all of them. And then Beatrice and Biscuit decide now they're friends because Biscuit came and saved Beatrice and that she understands that she really cares for her, even though they're kind of like different personality types. Later on, at like a later juncture, Biscuit comes by to tell us that she's been hanging out with Beatrice again and that they're good friends. And then she starts chatting about all the stuff they do together. And we contemplate that like, oh man, when Biscuit starts talking about this, we're going to be here all day listening to her. Which, that ends her Bond story. And that wraps up this interlude number 8. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.